The stars were cold and empty in the year 2147. Humanity had only just begun to explore the galaxy, and they were not ready for what waited in the darkness between worlds. The Terran colony ship Times Dawning Light Times drifted through a region of space known as the Hollow Reach. It was a dangerous place. Pirates hunted there. Slavers from distant empires prowled the shipping lanes, looking for easy prey. No one with any sense traveled through the Hollow Reach unless they had no other choice. Commander Danny Ortiz had no other choice. The Times Dawning Light Times carried 400 colonists in cryogenic sleep. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, and children. They were ordinary people hoping to build a new life on a distant world. Danny had promised to get them there safely. He had promised their families back on Earth that he would protect them. Now the ship was dying. The main engine had failed 3 days ago. A cascade of system failures followed. Life support was running on backup power. The navigation computer was offline. The communication array could barely send a signal beyond a few light years. Danny stood on the bridge, staring at the flickering screens. His crew of 12 worked frantically to keep the ship alive, but they all knew the truth. They were running out of time. "Send another distress signal," Danny ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Someone has to hear us." His communications officer, a young woman named Beth Reyes, shook her head slowly. "Commander, we've been broadcasting for 3 days. No one is coming." She was right. Danny knew she was right. Humanity was new to the galaxy. They had no allies, no friends, no one who cared if a single human ship disappeared in the void. The great empires of the galaxy saw humans as primitives. They were not worth saving. Danny closed his eyes. He thought about the 400 people sleeping in the cargo hold. They were trusting him. They had put their lives in his hands. "Keep broadcasting," he said quietly. "Until the power runs out, we keep trying." The hours passed slowly. The temperature on the bridge dropped as life support struggled to function. Danny wrapped himself in a thermal blanket and refused to leave his post. He watched the empty stars through the viewport and waited for a miracle he did not believe would come. Then the sensors beeped. Danny jumped to his feet so fast that he nearly fell. "What is it? What do you see?" His sensor operator, a man named Carlos Delgado, stared at his screen with wide eyes. "A ship, Commander. Small vessel. Coming in fast. It's not a design I recognize." Danny felt his heart pound. A ship could mean rescue. It could also mean pirates. In the Hollow Reach, you never knew what was coming until it was too late. "Can you identify them?" Danny asked. Carlos worked his controls. "Getting a signal now. They're hailing us." The main screen flickered to life. Danny found himself looking at a face unlike any he had ever seen. The creature was small, perhaps 4 feet tall at most. Its skin was soft gray, almost silver in the light. Its eyes were enormous, dark and gentle, filled with a warmth that Danny could feel even through the screen. "Human vessel," the creature said in careful, accented English. "This is Captain Lyra of the Valori Medical Frigate, Times Gentle Dawn **. We received your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" Danny could not speak for a moment. He had sent hundreds of signals into the void. He had begged for help from every direction. And now, finally, someone had answered. "Yes," he managed to say. "Yes. We need help. Our engines are dead. Life support is failing. We have 400 people in cryosleep. Please, if you can do anything." Captain Lyra tilted her head, her large eyes blinking slowly. "We are a small ship, Commander. We have few resources. But we will do what we can." The Valori vessel docked with the Times Dawning Light Times within the hour. Danny watched as a team of gray-skinned aliens boarded his ship, carrying tools and medical supplies. They were so small, so fragile-looking, that Danny wondered how they could possibly help, but they worked without rest. For 3 days and 3 nights, the Valori engineers crawled through the damaged sections of the Times Dawning Light **, repairing what they could. They shared their own food with the human crew, even though it meant they would go hungry on their journey home. They gave medicine to the sick and comfort to the frightened. Captain Lyra herself spent hours on the bridge with Danny, helping him restore the navigation systems. She was patient and kind, explaining each repair in simple terms. She never complained, never asked for payment, never demanded anything in return. On the third day, the engines came back online. The Time's dawning light times hummed with power once more. Life support stabilized. The colonists in cryosleep would survive. Danny found Captain Lyra in the cargo bay, preparing to return to her ship. She looked tired. Her gray skin was pale, and her movements were slow. She had given everything she had to save strangers she had never met. "Captain," Danny said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved us. You saved all of us." Lyra smiled gently. It was a strange expression on her alien face, but Danny understood it perfectly. "We are Valori," she said simply. "We help those who need help. It is what we do." "But why?" Danny asked. "No one else came. The great empires ignored us. We're nothing to them. Why did you risk your ship, your crew, to save us?" Lyra reached up and placed her small hand on Danny's arm. Her touch was light and warm. "Because kindness does not ask whether it will be rewarded," she said. "It simply gives. Perhaps one day, you will have the chance to help someone who needs you. Perhaps you will remember this moment. Now." Danny clasped her hand in both of his. He looked into her large, gentle eyes and made a promise. "We will remember," he said. "Humans don't forget kindness. I swear to you, Captain, if your people ever need us, we will come, no matter how long it takes, no matter how far we have to travel. We will remember what you did for us." Lyra smiled again, but there was sadness in her eyes. The Valori were a small people, weak and overlooked by the galaxy. They had no power, no influence, no allies. She did not believe that the humans would ever be in a position to help her kind, but she appreciated the sentiment. "Be well, Commander Danny Ortiz," she said. "May your journey be safe." The Valori ship departed, disappearing into the stars. Danny watched it go, and he made a silent vow. He would tell this story to everyone who would listen. He would make sure that humanity never forgot the small, gentle people who had saved them when no one else cared. And humanity did not forget. 200 years is a long time. Empires rise and fall. Stars burn out, and new ones are born. Species that once ruled the galaxy fade into memory, and others take their place. But some things do not change. Some things are passed down from parent to child, from generation to generation, until they become part of a people's very soul. Humanity remembered. The year was 2347, and the Terran Republic was no longer a collection of frightened colonists drifting through space. They had become something else entirely. Something that made the old empires nervous. It had not happened overnight. For decades after the rescue of the Time's dawning light asterisk, humans struggled to survive. They were attacked by pirates, exploited by alien traders, and dismissed by the great powers as primitive animals, who would never amount to anything. But humans were stubborn. They learned from their enemies. They studied every piece of alien technology they could find, taking it apart and building it better. They made alliances with other small species who were also ignored by the galaxy. They fought and bled and died, and they never gave up. By the time Admiral Katie Vance was born, humanity had become a force that could not be ignored. The Terran Republic controlled over 200 star systems. Their ships were fast and powerful. Their soldiers were feared across a dozen sectors. The species that had once laughed at humanity now watched them with nervous eyes. Katie stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Times TRS, Relentless Asterisk, looking out at the stars. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short, and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had commanded fleets, won wars, and buried too many friends. She was tired in ways that sleep could not fix, but she still remembered the stories. Her grandmother had told her about the Valori when Katie was just a little girl. She had described the small gray aliens with the gentle eyes, the ones who had saved humanity when no one else would help. Katie had grown up hearing about Captain Lyra and the crew of the Times Gentle Dawn **. She had learned the words that Commander Danny Ortiz had spoken before he died of old age. "We don't forget kindness." Those words were carved into the walls of every Terran military academy. Every officer in the fleet knew the story. It was part of who they were. Katie was reviewing routine reports when her communications officer spoke up. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Assembly." Katie raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Assembly was a council of the major powers in the galaxy. They rarely contacted the Terran Republic directly. Humans had a seat at the table now, but they were still considered outsiders by many of the older species. "Put it through," Katie ordered. The message was short and formal. It described a situation in a distant sector. A minor conflict between a small empire and an insignificant species. The Assembly had voted to classify it as an internal regional matter, which meant they would do nothing. Katie read the details, and her blood turned cold. The Keth Dominion had invaded Valar Prime. She read the words again, making sure she understood. The Valori homeworld was under attack. The same people who had saved humanity 2 centuries ago were being conquered by one of the most brutal empires in the galaxy. The Keth Dominion was known for its cruelty. They did not conquer planets to rule them. They conquered planets to strip them bare. They took every resource, enslaved every person, and left nothing but dead worlds behind them. They had destroyed dozens of species over the centuries, and no one had ever stopped them. And now they had come for the Valori. Katie stood up from her command chair. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, Priority Alpha." Within minutes, she was speaking to Fleet Admiral Greg Holloway, the commander of all Terran military forces. He was an old man with a weathered face and careful eyes. He listened as Katie explained the situation. "The Valori," Holloway said slowly. "I know the history, Admiral, but you're asking me to authorize military action in a sector that has no strategic value to the Republic. The Assembly has already washed their hands of it. If we intervene, we'll be acting alone." "I understand, sir," Katie replied. "But we owe them. We owe them everything." Holloway was silent for a long moment. Katie could see him thinking, weighing the costs and benefits. She knew what the politicians back on Earth would say. They would talk about resources and risks and diplomatic consequences. They would argue that the Valori had nothing to offer in return. But Katie also knew that Holloway remembered the stories. He had grown up with them, just like she had. "The Valori helped us when we were nothing," Katie continued. "They asked for nothing in return. They just saw people in trouble, and they helped. If we abandon them now, what does that say about who we are? What does that say about everything we claim to believe?" Holloway closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression. Something that looked like the young officer he had been, before decades of politics and compromise had worn him down. "You have authorization," he said quietly. "Take the Third Fleet. Do what needs to be done." Katie felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Holloway replied. "And Katie? Make sure the galaxy sees this. Make sure they understand what happens when someone helps humanity. We don't forget our debts." Katie nodded. "They'll understand, sir. I'll make sure of it." She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. They were watching her with eager eyes. They had all heard the conversation. They all knew what was coming. "Set course for the Velar system," Katie ordered. "Maximum speed. Send word to every ship in the Third Fleet. We're going to war." The bridge erupted in activity. Officers shouted orders, navigators plotted courses, and communication arrays lit up with messages. Within hours, 17 warships were moving through hyperspace. racing toward a distant world where a small, gentle species was fighting for survival. Katie watched the stars streak past the viewport and thought about Captain Lyra. The old Valori commander had died long ago, never knowing that her act of kindness would echo through centuries. She had simply helped because it was the right thing to do. Now humanity was coming to return the favor, and the galaxy would learn what it meant to have humans as friends. The sky above Velar Prime had been burning for 3 days. Elder Counselor Mira huddled in an underground shelter with hundreds of her people, listening to the sounds of destruction above. The walls shook with each explosion. Dust fell from the ceiling, children cried in their parents' arms, and the old ones prayed to gods who seemed to have abandoned them. Mira was 112 years old, ancient by Valori standards. She had lived a long and peaceful life, serving her people as a healer and then as a leader. She had never known war. The Valori had never needed to fight. They were small and gentle, and they had always believed that kindness would protect them. They had been wrong. The Keth Dominion had arrived without warning. Their massive warships had filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects. Their soldiers had poured down from the heavens, burning everything in their path. The Valori had no army, no weapons, no way to fight back. Mira had sent messages to the Galactic Assembly, begging for help. The response had been cold and formal. The great powers would not intervene. The Valori were on their own. She thought about her ancestor, Captain Lyra, who had commanded the Time's Gentle Dawn times 2 centuries ago. Lyra had helped a stranded human ship in the Hollow Reach, giving everything she had to save strangers. The humans had promised to remember. They had sworn to repay the kindness one day. But that was so long ago. The humans had been weak and desperate back then. Mira did not even know if they still existed. Perhaps they had been destroyed, like so many small species before them. Perhaps they had forgotten. A young aide rushed into the shelter, her gray face pale with fear. "Elder Counselor, the Keth are approaching the capital. Their ground forces are less than 10 miles away." Mira closed her eyes. This was the end, then. Her people would be enslaved or killed. Their world would be stripped bare. Everything they had built would be erased, as if the Valori had never existed at all. And then the communications console crackled to life. Mira opened her eyes and stared at the device. No one should be able to contact them. The Keth had destroyed their communication satellites on the first day of the invasion, but somehow, a signal was coming through, strong and clear. A voice spoke. It was harsh and determined, speaking in accented Valori. "Valar Prime. This is Admiral Katie Vance of the Terran Republic 3rd Fleet. We are entering your star system. Hold on. Help is coming." Mira could not breathe. She could not think. She simply stared at the console, trying to understand what she had just heard. The humans had come. Above the planet, the battle had already begun. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Times, TRS, Relentless Asterisk, watching as her fleet emerged from hyperspace. The Keth Dominion had brought 40 warships to conquer Valar Prime. They had expected no resistance. They had expected an easy victory. They had not expected humanity. "All ships, attack formation," Katie ordered. Her voice was cold and calm. "Target their heavy cruisers first. Do not let them reach the planet." The Terran fleet moved like a single organism. They had trained for years, fought dozens of battles together. They knew each other's movements, without needing to speak. The 17 warships spread out in a curved formation, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The Keth commander was confused. His sensors showed human vessels, but that made no sense. The humans had no reason to be here. The Valori were worthless. Why would anyone risk a war to save them? He did not understand humanity. He would learn. The first volley of Terran railgun fire tore through a Keth cruiser, splitting it in half. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. The Times, relentless Times, pushed forward, its massive cannons firing again and again, each shot finding its target. But Katie knew the battle in space would take time. The Valori on the ground could not wait. Every minute that passed, more of them died. "Launch the drop pods," she ordered. "Get our Marines on the surface. Now." In the cargo bays of the fleet, 10,000 Terran Marines sealed their armor and climbed into drop pods. These were the best soldiers humanity had to offer. They had fought on frozen worlds and burning deserts, in jungles and cities and the vacuum of space. They feared nothing. Lieutenant Ryan Cassidy was 26 years old, with dark hair and steady hands. He had joined the Marines because he wanted to protect people. Now he was about to drop into a war zone to save an alien species he had never met. He was not afraid. He was proud. "Remember why we're here," he told his platoon as they prepared to launch. "These people saved our ancestors when no one else would help. They gave us a chance to survive. Now we're going to return the favor. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when someone is kind to humanity." The drop pods launched. Ryan felt the force of acceleration slam him back in his seat as his pod screamed through the atmosphere. Fire burned outside the tiny window. The heat was intense, but the pod's shields held. In less than 3 minutes, he was on the ground. The capital city of Valar Prime was in ruins. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. Fires burned everywhere. The smell of smoke and death filled the air, but Ryan did not have time to grieve. He had work to do. His platoon moved through the streets, weapons ready. They found Keth soldiers within minutes and engaged without hesitation. The Terran Marines were brutal and efficient. They cleared block after block, pushing the enemy back. As they advanced, Ryan saw something that made his heart ache. A group of Valori children were trapped in a collapsed building, crying for help. Keth soldiers were approaching, their weapons raised. Ryan did not think. He simply acted. He charged forward, firing his rifle. 2 Keth soldiers fell before they knew what hit them. The rest turned to face him. But his platoon was already there, cutting them down with precise shots. Ryan ran to the collapsed building. The children inside were small and gray, with huge, frightened eyes. They looked at him like he was a monster. "It's okay," Ryan said gently, lowering his weapon. "We're here to help. We're going to get you out." He began pulling away the rubble with his bare hands. Other Marines joined him. Together, they worked through the night, freeing the trapped children one by one. When the last child was safe, a small Valori girl looked up at Ryan with wonder in her eyes. "Who are you?" she asked in her soft voice. "Why did you come?" Ryan knelt down so he could meet her eyes. He remembered the stories he had heard since childhood, the history that every human learned by heart. "A long time ago," he said, "your people helped mine when no one else would. You saved us when we were lost and afraid. We promised we would never forget. And humans keep their promises." The little girl did not fully understand, but she could feel the truth in his words. She reached out and touched his armored hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Ryan smiled. "You're welcome. Now let's get you somewhere safe." Across the burning city, more Terran Marines were doing the same thing. They fought the Keth with everything they had, and in between battles, they rescued survivors. They carried wounded Valori to safety. They shared their food and water. They protected the weak and punished the cruel. The Valori watched in amazement as the strange, tall aliens risked their lives for them. They did not understand why. They could not believe that anyone would care about them so much. But humanity cared. Humanity remembered. And before the sun rose again, the capital was free. Admiral Zorath of the Keth Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times, Iron Claw *, and watched his battle plan fall apart. He had commanded invasions for 50 years. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. He had never lost a battle. And he had never retreated from an enemy. The Keth Dominion was the most feared empire in 4 sectors, and Zorath was their greatest warrior. But he had never faced humans before. When the Terran fleet had arrived, Zorath had laughed. 17 ships against his 40? The humans were fools. They were throwing away their lives for a worthless species on a worthless planet. But the humans did not fight like other species. They did not form careful lines and exchange fire at safe distances. They charged directly into battle. Ignoring losses that would have broken any other force, they targeted his strongest ships first, tearing them apart with brutal efficiency, and they would not stop. No matter how many casualties they took, no matter how much damage they suffered, they kept attacking. They fought like they had nothing to lose, like they were willing to die to the last ship. Zoreth did not understand this kind of warfare. He did not understand why anyone would sacrifice so much for a species that could offer nothing in return. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice trembling, "we've lost 12 cruisers. The enemy is pushing toward our command position," Zoreth snarled in frustration. "Then destroy the planet. Begin orbital bombardment of population centers. If the humans want to save these creatures, let them watch their new friends burn." It was a cruel order, but Zoreth was a cruel being. He would rather destroy the prize than let his enemies take it. The Keth ships began to move, positioning themselves for a bombardment run. Massive kinetic weapons powered up, preparing to rain death on the cities below. Millions of Valori would die in minutes. Captain Chris Medina saw what was happening from the bridge of his destroyer, the Times Vigilant Asterisk. He was 34 years old, a veteran of 6 campaigns, and he knew exactly what those Keth ships were about to do. He also knew that the Times, Relentless Times, and the other heavy ships were too far away to stop it. They were engaged with the Keth battle line, fighting to break through the enemy formation. By the time they reached the bombardment group, it would be too late. But the Times, Vigilant Times, was close enough to do something stupid. "Helm," Chris ordered. "Put us between the Keth formation and the planet." Full speed. His first officer, a woman named Lisa Park, stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, there are 8 Keth cruisers in that formation. We can't fight them all. We'll be destroyed." Chris nodded slowly. "Probably. But if we don't try, 3 million Valori die. That's not something I can live with." He looked around the bridge at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they were also ready. They had all grown up with the same stories he had. They all knew what humanity owed the Valori. "Anyone who wants to leave, I won't judge you," Chris said. "Get to the escape pods now." "But I'm staying." No one moved. Lisa smiled, despite the fear in her eyes. "We're with you, Captain. Let's go save some people." Quote. The Times, Vigilant Times, accelerated toward the Keth formation. It was a small ship, barely half the size of a Keth cruiser. It had no chance of winning this fight. Everyone on board knew they were probably going to die. They did not care. The Keth ships opened fire as the Times, Vigilant Times approached. The destroyer's shields flared under the assault, absorbing hit after hit. Alarms wailed across the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from every section of the ship, but the Times, Vigilant Times, kept moving. It positioned itself directly in the path of the bombardment, blocking the kinetic projectiles with its own hull. The first impact nearly tore the ship in half. Metal screamed and twisted. Fires erupted on multiple decks. The lights flickered and died, leaving only the red glow of emergency systems. Chris gripped his command chair as the deck shook beneath him. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He could hear screaming in the distance, and he knew that people were dying, but the bombardment had stopped. The Keth could not hit the planet without going through the Times Vigilant Asterisk, and the little destroyer refused to move. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, Lisa reported, her voice strained. "We're losing atmosphere. Weapons are offline. Engines at 30%. "Hold position," Chris ordered through gritted teeth. "Not one shot gets through." The Times, Vigilant Times, held for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of constant bombardment. 11 minutes of fire and death and destruction. The ship was torn apart piece by piece, sections blasted away into the void. More than half the crew died at their posts, but they held. And in those 11 minutes, Admiral Vance broke through the Keth battle line. The Times TRS, Relentless Times, emerged from the chaos of combat, its massive railguns aimed directly at the bombardment group. The other Terran ships followed, forming up behind their flagship like wolves on the hunt. "All ships," Katie ordered, her voice cold with fury. "Destroy them. No mercy." The Terran fleet unleashed everything they had. Railgun rounds tore through Keth hulls. Missiles streaked across the darkness, exploding in brilliant flashes of light. In less than 5 minutes, the entire bombardment group was reduced to burning wreckage. Katie watched the destruction with grim satisfaction, then turned her attention to the real target. The Times Ironclaw **. Admiral Zorath's flagship. "Helm, take us behind the enemy command ship. Prepare all batteries." The Times, relentless Times, jumped through hyperspace for a fraction of a second, just long enough to reposition behind the Times Ironclaw **. It was a dangerous maneuver, one that could have destroyed the ship if the calculations were even slightly wrong. But Terran navigators were the best in the galaxy. They did not make mistakes. The Times, relentless Times, emerged from hyperspace directly behind the Keth flagship and opened fire. The Times Ironclaw Times had powerful shields, thick armor, and heavy weapons. It was the pride of the Keth fleet, the symbol of their dominance, but it could not survive a point-blank broadside from a Terran dreadnought. Railgun rounds punched through the shields like they were not there. Explosions rippled across the hull. The Times Ironclaw Times shuddered and groaned, its systems failing one by one. Admiral Zorath stood on his dying bridge, watching everything he had built crumble around him. He still did not understand. He still could not comprehend why the humans would throw away so much for a worthless species. "Why?" he whispered to no one. "Why would they do this?" He never got an answer. The next volley from the Times, relentless Times, tore through the Times Ironclaw's Times reactor, and the flagship vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. With their commander dead and their fleet in ruins, the remaining Keth ships turned and fled. They scattered in every direction, running as fast as their engines could carry them. The Terran fleet let most of them go. They had delivered their message. The galaxy would understand. Admiral Vance watched the enemy retreat, then opened a channel to the surface. "Villar Prime, this is Admiral Vance of the Terran Republic. Your skies are clear. The Keth are gone. You're safe now." The response came through static and tears. It was Elder Counselor Mira, her old voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you. We never thought. We never believed." "Believe it," Katie said gently. 200 years ago, your people saved ours. Now we've returned the favor. And we're not leaving. From this day forward, the Valori are under the protection of the Terran Republic. Anyone who threatens you will answer to us." She ended the transmission and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the wreckage of the Times, vigilant Times, floated in the darkness. Captain Medina and his crew had given their lives to save millions they had never met. Katie made a silent promise to remember them. Their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Nothing humanity did would ever be forgotten. That was what it meant to be human. The Galactic Assembly had not seen anything like this in 1,000 years. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from over 100 species. They came from ancient empires and young republics, from worlds of ice and worlds of fire. They were diplomats and warriors, merchants and scholars. They had gathered to discuss the impossible thing that humanity had just done. Ambassador Nate Sullivan walked to the central platform, feeling the weight of 100 alien gazes upon him. He was 58 years old, a career diplomat who had spent decades navigating the complex politics of the galaxy. He had given many speeches in this chamber, but none as important as this one. He looked around at the assembled representatives. Some watched with curiosity, others with fear. A few, from species that had underestimated humanity before, watched with something that might have been respect. Nate cleared his throat and began to speak. "Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Assembly, I come before you today to explain why the Terran Republic sent 17 warships across half the galaxy to save a species that most of you had forgotten existed." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The Valori have no strategic value. Their homeworld has few resources. Their technology is primitive by galactic standards. They have no military, no economic power, no political influence. By every measure that the great empires use to judge worth, they are insignificant." The Keth representative shifted uncomfortably. His people had lost 40 warships and their greatest admiral. They had expected the assembly to condemn the Terran attack as an act of unprovoked aggression. Instead, they found themselves on trial in the court of galactic opinion. "So why did we come?" Nate continued. "Why did we risk our ships and our soldiers for a people who could offer nothing in return?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was old and worn, clearly an antique. He held it up so everyone could see. "This is a distress beacon. It was recovered from a Terran colony ship called the Time's Dawning Light *, 203 years ago. That ship was stranded in the Hollow Reach, slowly dying. 400 humans were on board, including women and children. They sent distress signals for 3 days, begging for help." Nate looked around the chamber. Some of the representatives shifted uncomfortably. They knew what came next. No one answered. Not the great empires. Not the assembly. Not anyone who might have had the power to help. Humanity was new and weak, and no one thought we were worth saving. He lowered his voice, but the acoustics of the chamber carried every word. But the Valori answered. A single medical frigate, commanded by a captain named Lyra, flew into dangerous territory to rescue strangers. They repaired our ship. They shared their food. They saved 400 lives and asked for nothing in return. Nate placed the beacon on the podium before him. Before the Valori departed, our commander made a promise. He said that humans would remember. He swore that if the Valori ever needed us, we would come, no matter how long it took, no matter how far we had to travel. He straightened and looked directly at the Keth representative. It took 200 years, but we kept our promise. The chamber was silent. Even the most cynical representatives could feel the power of the moment. This was not a story about politics or strategy. This was something deeper. "Let this be a lesson to every species in this chamber," Nate said, his voice rising. "Let this be a warning to every empire that watches from beyond these walls. Humans do not forget those who helped us in our darkest hours." He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Help us when we are small, and we will move fleets for you when we are strong. Show us kindness when we are weak, and we will shield you with our bodies when we are powerful. We remember our debts, and we pay them in full." The Keth representative tried to speak, but Nate cut him off. "But we also remember those who hurt us. We remember those who ignored us when we cried for help. We remember those who tried to enslave us, exploit us, destroy us." He turned to face the entire chamber. "The Keth Dominion attacked our friends. They burned cities and killed innocents. They tried to wipe out a species that had done nothing wrong except exist. And when they learned that humanity was coming, they did not retreat. They tried to finish the slaughter before we could arrive." His voice dropped to a cold, hard whisper. "That was a mistake. The Keth Dominion will face consequences for what they have done. We will support sanctions. We will back investigations. We will hunt down every war criminal and bring them to justice. And if the Keth ever threaten the Valori again, we will not stop until their empire is dust." The chamber erupted in murmurs. This was not the language of diplomacy. This was a declaration of intent. Clear and brutal. Nate let the noise die down before speaking again. "I know some of you think we are being foolish. You think we wasted resources on a species that cannot help us. You think we should have let the Valori die and focused on our own interests." He shook his head slowly. "You do not understand us. You see our ships and our soldiers, and you think you know what we are, but you do not know our hearts. You do not know what drives us." He picked up the old distress beacon and held it high. "This is what drives us. This memory. This promise. The knowledge that 200 years ago, when humanity was nothing, one small species showed us kindness. They gave us hope when we had none. They taught us that the universe was not as cold and cruel as we had feared." Nate smiled, and there was warmth in it despite everything he had said. "We are not the monsters some of you think we are. We do not conquer for sport or destroy for pleasure. We want peace. We want friendship. We want to build a galaxy where species help each other, where kindness is repaid with kindness." He lowered the beacon and placed it back on the podium. "But we will never, ever forget those who helped us. And we will always come for them, no matter the cost." The speech ended. Nate stepped back from the podium and waited. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, representatives began to stand. First one, then a dozen, then 100. They rose from their seats in a gesture of respect that had not been seen in the assembly for generations. Not everyone stood. The Keth representative remained seated, his face twisted with hatred. A few other species who had underestimated humanity stayed down as well. But most of the chamber was on its feet. They understood now. They finally understood what humanity was. 6 months later, Elder Counselor Mira traveled to Earth. It was the first time a Valori leader had ever visited the human homeworld. She was old and frail, but she insisted on making the journey herself. President Laura Chen met her at the spaceport in Geneva, surrounded by an honor guard of Terran Marines. The Marines saluted as Mira descended from her ship, and the old Valori was moved to tears. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall of the Terran Senate. Thousands watched in person, and billions more watched through broadcasts across the galaxy. Mira walked slowly to the podium, carrying a small package in her hands. She looked out at the sea of human faces and felt something she had never expected to feel. She felt hope. 200 years ago, she began, her soft voice amplified so all could hear. My ancestor, Captain Lyra, helped a stranded human ship. She did not do it for reward or recognition. She did it because it was right. She did it because the Valori believe that kindness is its own purpose. Mira opened the package and revealed the old distress beacon that Ambassador Sullivan had shown to the Galactic Assembly. We kept this, she said. For 200 years, we preserved it in our most sacred temple. Not because we expected anything in return. Not because we thought the humans would remember. We kept it because it reminded us of a moment when we made a difference in someone's life. She held the beacon out toward President Chen. But you did remember. You came for us when no one else would. You fought for us. You died for us. You showed the entire galaxy what loyalty and gratitude truly mean. President Chen stepped forward and accepted the beacon. Her eyes were wet with tears. We will never forget what your people did for us, she said. And we will never stop protecting you. From this day forward, the Valori and the humans are family. Your enemies are our enemies. Your friends are our friends. Whatever comes, we face it together. Mira smiled, her old face lighting up with joy. Captain Lyra would be proud, she said. She always believed that kindness would find its way back to those who gave it. She just never imagined it would take 200 years. The two leaders embraced, human and Valori, tall and small, young and old. The audience rose to its feet, applauding and cheering. Across the galaxy, species watched the scene and wondered. They wondered what it would be like to have humanity as a friend. They wondered what it would mean to show kindness to a species that never forgot. And in the years that followed, many of them found out. Because humans do not forget those who help them, and their gratitude can rattle worlds.